What is up, everybody? This is Mike Singer at blueandgold.com, joined by our senior editor, Lou Somogyi. This is our first off-season episode of the Irish Huddle, covering all things Notre Dame football. It is January 21st, but you might be listening to this on the 22nd, so happy upcoming weekend to everyone. Lou, how's your January been, man? It's been pretty busy off season for the Fighting Irish so far.
Can't wait for the season to start because things just slow down then because we're just this is the busy time. It's the hot stove league like in Major League Baseball, where all the transactions that occur between November and the start of the season become even bigger news than the actual season itself.
I mean, it's recruiting. I mean, my full-time job, Lou, is to cover recruiting. And, these guys aren't even, most of them don't even see meaningful action until 3 years down the road. So, but we do appreciate everyone who loves recruiting that. So I have a job. But again, this is the Irish Huddle. We appreciate everyone watching, no matter how you're listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, we really appreciate you. Hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel if you're not. We have so much cool stuff going on at blueandgold.com's our YouTube page here, and more ideas coming up here in the near future that I think you guys will really love. And you're listening via podcast, appreciate you as well. Please make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening to the podcast, and leave us a 5-star review, and just tell us how handsome we are and just how much you love listening to the show. We would really appreciate that. As we're recording this, Lou, and I want to preface this by saying it's the big news of the day so far, because who knows, like we've said, January's been so busy, but just seems to have so much news. So the news of the day so far, again, was this recruiting violation that Notre Dame got hit with. A couple things that occurred, all three of the violations occurred in 2019. You had a Notre Dame coach commit two of them, which the report did not name the coach, Lou, but everyone is kind of in agreement. It's probably Todd Light. He had impermissible contact with a recruit at the time in Seattle area, which, nothing. It wasn't a Tennessee McDonald's bag situation with money, and it was more of a violation of the bump rule that Florida and Texas A&M apparently had the same issue. So I think it might have been more of a thing with this high school than anything that went on with the colleges. And then apparently the second violation was a Notre Dame coach was text messaging a recruit before September 1 of junior season. You're not allowed to text before then. And apparently Light, who again we're assuming this is, thought the recruit was a 2020 who he would have been allowed to text message, but at the time not a 2021. And then the third was Brian Kelly at Pickerington Central High School in Ohio, just outside Columbus. At the high school, that's where Lorenzo Styles, Notre Dame 2021 signee, is from. And Brian Kelly was asked to take a picture with a prospective student athlete. Brian Kelly initially declined and then did take the picture. So for our YouTube audience, we have the penalties from this up on the screen: a year of probation, $5,000 fine. Oh man, I'm sure that's hurt Notre Dame's pockets. Reduced football official visits by 1 for the 2020 to 2021 academic year. Notre Dame's not going to be able to recruit at this specific high school in Seattle, which they don't really recruit in Seattle anyways. So my opinion on this is the one penalty that might hurt Notre Dame the most is the probation, because then if Notre Dame gets hit with something again, then the penalties will be a lot bigger. But I mean, Notre Dame runs a pretty clean program. I mean, so I don't foresee anything else happening. But hey, it's 2021. Who knows? Lou, I'll throw it to you. Reaction here. I mean, what's your take on this? I mean, for the most part, it's just, I mean, Notre Dame did the crime, and they're getting the time, and the crime was small, and the time here is small in terms of the punishment. So I mean, I feel like there's not a ton to take away here.
You know those situations like on a football field where players might get into an entanglement and somebody throws a punch and it's the guy who throws the second punch who always gets caught. somehow it always seems to me Notre Dame, whatever minute thing it does, it's going to get busted. There could be 1,000 things going on, but the eye in the sky is going to be on Notre Dame there. And I don't say that as a homer or as a woe is Notre Dame that they're the ones who, go through these things when it's not just a pretty clean program. They take tremendous pains and pride to try to do the right thing. That doesn't mean, look, I try to do the right thing many times and screw up regularly. And I'm not trying to justify the action and all, but it's like, man, how does everything that Notre Dame does always does seem to hit the radar? Um, and when you see that thing at the top there, the 1 year of probation, years ago, you looked at it and say, oh, well, what does that mean? They can't go to a bowl game. They're not going to be ranked weekly in the polls or anything like that. It just means that if, anything happens between now and that next year, then maybe some things could be coming. But now this is just kind of warning, a warning ticket there, the cop lets you off. Not that I know anything about that with the driving thing, but and say just keep it under the speed limit next time.
Yeah, I even talked to a source on the Notre Dame side of things. I talked to a source in, how do I describe this source? Just kind of like a general compliance source in the world of college football to get reaction here. And both of them are just like, there's really no sweat in this. Again, the only thing you would have any concern about is if like even three small things like this happened next time, then maybe they would get put
Yeah,
on a 3 or 4 year probation. Maybe it's from 5,000 to 30,000. Maybe instead of one official visit reduced, it's 10. So at that point, it might be more of a concern. But here, I don't think that there's a ton.
this has happened previously. I mean, I can go back all the way to 1971, 50 years ago. There was some kind of incident that happened here. And then in the 90s, there were some things there where I think they even had two scholarships taken away for one recruiting season. And they really weren't going to use it anyway. And most of the time, they were under 85 at that point. But it's not unique. It just always seems that if Notre Dame does have its hand in the cookie jar with something, it's going to get busted.
If you want to talk about recruiting violations, you guys see the story at Tennessee? Imagine going through the McDonald's drive-through and instead of a Big Mac, you get like $2,000 or something, and then you
It
can buy
gives
a
new
lot of Big Macs.
it gives new meaning to Happy Meal.
All right, with that joke, Lou crushed that one. Let's move on to some other topics here. Notre Dame, Lou, since August, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, has had 12 players enter the transfer portal. Here are the ones that happened during the football season. You had Kofi Wardlow and Jamion Franklin, a couple defensive linemen, Jordan Genmark Heath, a linebacker, and Isaiah Robertson, a receiver. So those were ones that we had known about for a while. But here's are the guys who had left since the Rose Bowl game. Notre Dame lost to Alabama. Jafar Armstrong and Jameer Smith, running backs. Of course, Smith entered or announced during the football season that he was not going to be with the team any longer, but didn't enter the portal until January. Colin Grunhard, offensive lineman, who has since landed with Kansas. Ovi Agofu, defensive end. Houston Griffith, safety. Jack Lamb, linebacker, and Isaiah Rutherford, who is a cornerback that is now with Arizona. So, Lou, question for you is, of those guys, who'd you like to see most return to Notre Dame? Is there some guys that you would feel like, man, if they came back, would really help out Notre Dame?
Well, Todd Burlage, and I did a point counterpoint earlier this week on who you would like to see. And he took the natural one I think that most people would look at is Houston Griffith, just because of the need at safety and having somebody play next to Kyle Hamilton. And the fact that, look, Houston Griffith was the number 43 ranked player in that class of 2018 national. He was Notre Dame's highest ranked player from that class. And so there's always going to be that feeling that someday he'll bust out. He'll bust out. He was a top 50 guy. And, he's been given so many opportunities. He impressed when he came in as an early entrant in March or January of 2018. And the coaching staff said, we got to find some role for him, get him on the field. And so they found the nickel role for him. But as the year went on, they replaced him with Nick Coleman. Then the next season, consensus All-American Julian Love turns pro after his junior season. It's like, okay, boundary corner. This would be an ideal spot for you, so especially because he's got very good tackling skills, and that didn't work out. So it's like, okay, we recruit him for safety. Let's move him over to safety and let him just get acclimated there, and we can start him in 2020 when both Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott left. Well, he's got that open opportunity there too, and they decided, okay, we're better off with Sean Crawford, who hasn't played safety either. He was a nickel and a cornerback, and he played the entire year there. So something's just hasn't been clicking. I'm sure the staff has been frustrated. He's been frustrated. Maybe he felt he needed, to look somewhere else. Maybe things had run its course here, but they are trying to get him back, Mike. And I can understand that. New defensive coordinator, probably a new safeties coach as well, new opportunity, no preconceived notions or anything. He'd be somebody there. Ovi Agufo, I made an argument for just because, they're not going to have the depth that they've had the past several years. I mean, when you think about it, 2 years ago, you had Khalid Kareem, Julian Aquara, Dalen Hayes, Ade Ogundiji. And then even when Dalen Hayes had a season-ending injury in the fourth game, you had Jameer Jones, who did an outstanding job. And you lose Kareem and you lose Aquara. This time you lose Hayes and Ogundiji. And you've got a great, great prospect here with Isaiah Foskey, but you don't quite have the same depth. And I think this would have been an opportunity for him to be in that depth rotation a little bit more this season. One more guy you could make an argument for is Jack Lamb, who I thought performed very well in the sub packages in 2019 when he was healthy. He's had a litany of injuries, and that buck linebacker position is still wide open, with Marist and Shane Simon and Jack Kaiser, and maybe Jack Lamb felt that, okay, maybe someplace else I need a fresh start too. Now, all of them were early entrants in January of 2018, so I believe they would all be on course to receive their undergraduate degree from Notre Dame this spring or summer.
Now, interesting thing, Lou, as you were talking, I was pulling up the snap counts for Notre Dame's 2020 season. Do you know off the top of your head how many snaps Houston Griffith had?
He had, I think, 215.
All right, I'm very impressed. Yes, 215 on the dot per Pro Football Focus. That is fourth among the safeties. Sean Crawford, 654. Kyle Hamilton, 580. I know some of Kyle Hamilton's snaps because, he was ejected with targeting. And then DJ Brown, 243, so a good bit more than Hamilton.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is the surprising is you get surpassed in snap counts by somebody who was recruited as a corner in that same class, but he's getting more action as a safety than you are. So I'm sure some frustration has settled in there.
Yeah, in his stats, I mean, I think when most of us think about Houston Griffith, we just think, yeah, he's bounced around a little bit, but that recruiting ranking, man, number 43 in the country back in 2018, that highest rank. His 2018 stats as a true freshman, 14 tackles, 2 pass deflections. 2019, 5 tackles, 1 pass deflection, and 104 snaps. And then 2020, again, with those 215 snaps, guys, 14 tackles, no pass deflections. He still hasn't had an interception in his career. So I was just, as I'm looking at this as recording, I thought those numbers were bigger. I thought he had a little bit more impressive stats there. But clearly, and like Lou said, Notre Dame staff would love to have Houston Griffith back. So in looking at the safety room, Lou, if Houston Griffith were to come back, how big of an impact would that be just to the overall depth? Because Not that Sean Crawford was, had an amazing season at safety. An experienced guy you lose, and you have Kyle Hamilton. But other than that, DJ Brown, would be the only safety who, if Griffith does leave, then DJ Brown's your only experienced safety other than Hamilton.
Yeah, the thing that surprises me, Mike, is, and I don't think any of us would have believed this. If you tell me in August that the player with the most snaps on defense this year would be Sean Crawford with 654. I believe Jeremiah had 647, seven behind. But because of Sean's history of injuries, three major surgeries, and that's not even including last year when he had a dislocated elbow, it's like you kind of hold your breath every August. It's like, stay healthy, Sean, stay healthy. And for him to play 654 snaps, it indicates to me there just wasn't confidence by the coaching staff to insert anybody else in there. Because you saw, even in 2019, even though Alohi Gilman and Jalen Elliott were team captains and veterans that had totally earned the trust, the staff found a way to get Kyle Hamilton onto the field. It's like,
Right.
he's too good. And that same feeling hasn't occurred with Houston Griffith. And that's the frustration that I kind of refer to, I think, on both sides. It's like Houston's got to be wondering, what is it I got to do? And the staff is probably wondering, how do we, find a place for him?
All right, let's take a look at some of the returning starters for Notre Dame in the 2021 season. Some of the notables: running back Kyron Williams, slot receiver Aver Davis, tight end Michael Mayer. On the offensive line, Jarrett Patterson, a returning starter, of course, Zeke Carell, and Josh Lugg also had some starts on the offensive line as well. Myron Tagovailoa Amosa, Kurt Heinisch, sixth year for Kurt Heinisch. Gotta love that. Linebackers Drew White, Shane Simon moving to the secondary. Clarence Lewis, the shocker of that 2020 recruiting class. I think people aren't as excited as they should be about Clarence Lewis. I mean, to come in and beat out Tariq Bracy, who we had pretty high expectations for this past season. And, look, Clarence Lewis didn't have an amazing season by any stretch, but dude was mostly a receiver in high school, guys. And he had a solid, really respectable season. Of course, Kyle Hamilton, and then your specialist, Jonathan Duover, Jay Bramblett, and Michael Vinson, your kicker, punter, and long snapper, respectively. So, kind of get that way too early look, Lou, and these guys in particular, these guys who were considered starters this past season, who do you really feel like can take the next step in from just a starter to like really a superstar?
Well, the superstar status, it's so hard to project.
I'm sorry, Lou.
You,
That was just me trying to make a simple question sexy, but
yeah,
you know what I'm getting at.
I think what you may be referring to is you look at somebody like a Javon McKinley, who, first 4 years, he catches 11 passes, and all of a sudden, as a fifth-year senior, and part of it is because there's injury and attrition at the receiver position. He plays something like 671 snaps himself. Can't take him off the field because of his blocking. It's tied with Michael Mayer for the team lead in receptions. Now, when we are talking about superstar status, I think Michael Mayer would fall into that category the same way that Kyle Hamilton would be. And those
Kyron?
are probably good. Yeah, and Kyle Hamilton. Both with Kyron and Kyle Hamilton, you got to be thinking about, if they have another strong season, they could be turning pro. I think by the middle of Kyle Hamilton's freshman season, we were already looking at like, well, enjoy the 3 years you have with him. And I think the same feeling with Michael Mayer at tight end as well. Brian Kelly, would you believe, in his 11 years, he's had 4 tight ends who turned pro after their junior season. Tommy Tremble became the most recent one, but prior to that, you had Cole Kmet the year prior, and then Troy Nicholas, and then Kyle Rudolph. And each of those previous 3 were second-round draft picks. I don't know if Tommy will go that high necessarily, but, Michael probably will be number 5 on that list, and he'll probably go higher than anyone. Jared Patterson is a guy, he's really that everything on the offensive line in 2021 will be on where will he be stationed. I think they're ready maybe with Zeke Corral, a good feeling. I thought he performed pretty well, held his own certainly against Alabama in the college football playoff, that he's ready to take that next step as a starter. Jared Patterson came in as a left tackle, played 4 games there as a freshman. And that, speaking of great positions in the Kelly era, if Liam Eichenberg is drafted in the first round, where he's been projected, or high second round, I mean, you've had Zach Martin, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, and Liam Eichenberg throughout the Kelly era. There, so that's become that centerpiece position, protecting the blind side of the quarterback there, and maybe Jared Patterson moves out there. I don't know if he's going to be available this spring with a Liz Frank injury. That's usually sidelines you for quite a while, but maybe that gives an opportunity for Zeke to really establish himself at that center position. Um, I think both Kurt Hinish, it's actually only his 5th year, but it feels like he's been here 8 years.
That's right, right.
Um, yeah, and Myron in the middle. They can provide that strong base and anchor, sort of the way that Ade and Dalen did at the end positions as 5th-year seniors there. So they give you a good nucleus and strong anchor there, because it's going to be a rotation in the interior anyway, with other guys like Jacob Lacey and Ryan Mills and Jason Adamalola. So that's been an area that's been recruited and developed very, very well by Mike Gelston.
Yeah, when I mentioned Kurt Hinish, I said 6th year, but I was thinking it was that fifth playing year that you
Yeah.
usually don't see. Lou, you mentioned the tight end success that Notre Dame has had. When you say that, and then I'm thinking about a position like cornerback, like Notre Dame just hasn't recruited those stud cornerbacks like a Patrick Surtain guy. And I'm like, so that Notre Dame's tight end you, O-line you, whatever that is, but like why? And I'm not expecting you to know the answer, Lou, but just like why can't Notre Dame get corners? I don't think it's just the coaches to blame. Is it just like corners have a certain mentality, like an offensive lineman's more of a bring your lunch pail guy, or wide receiver or corner might be a little bit more of a, I don't know, I can't think of any other word except divas, and I don't really mean to say that, but you guys get what I'm saying. Do you think those personalities just might not go to South, like attract to South Bend? Like I don't know, I'm spitballing here, Lou. What is it?
Yeah, no, this was kind of the same concern many years ago with the defensive end position. Why can't Notre Dame get that defensive end, that pass rushing terror? And then, under Brian Kelly, I mean, even you had Justin Tuck in 2002 to 2004, and Victor Abiameri was a second round pick thereafter, and he was there for 2006. It's like you would get one, but you don't really follow it up. And that was always considered the toughest position, because there are very, very few guys out there who are truly in the elite category. That word elite is thrown around quite a bit. It seems like every year we hear Notre Dame got an elite guy there at defensive end or so. And those are really very rare. But you started off with 2011, you got Stephon Tuitt and Aaron Lynch. Aaron didn't last very long, but it started showing that, yeah, Notre Dame can go after those type of players. And, in 2016, when they were able to land Dalen Hayes and Ade Odigandiji and Khalid Kareem and Julian Aquara, it's like, hey, maybe Notre Dame can do this. Now you have an Isaiah Foskey. So you need to get just one to start off with at cornerback. Is it Clarence Lewis? I don't know if anyone would have anticipated it would be Clarence at this point,
Wasn't me.
but we'll see how it develops. Brian Kelly said in August that he's right up there with Kavari Russell, who was a freshman All-American in 2012 on that great team that played in the BCS championship and earned freshman All-American honors. Then the next year you got Cole Luke, who was a 4-star, and he's played some, but they haven't really gotten that, one standout that you mentioned, where it's like he can take control of that side of the field. There's really no such thing as a shutdown corner in today's game. It's more about damage control. even with the Patrick Surtain, everyone's going to get burned along the way. But when we talk about that next level, everything is really more so on the edge. Receivers on offense and cornerbacks on defense. And when you talk about the edge, maybe defensive ends too, but you hopefully feel you have that with somebody like a Foskey.
I would argue that looking at offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, running back, I mean, man, Notre Dame stacks up with anybody. It's really
Mhm.
corner, receiver, and quarterback.
Quarterback. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I would
Which
make that
happened to
argument.
be, the game today revolves so much on receivers, the pass, pitch and catch, and stopping the pitch and catch.
Yeah. It's funny. Mason Plummer and I did a video on our YouTube page here recently. What is the most important position for Notre Dame in the 2022 recruiting class? And he went with linebacker more so because Marcus Freeman coming in. Like let's see him just get a bunch of stud players. And I liked his response, but for me it was. I just kind of lumped in secondary. And then when I posted the video on the message board, of course, everyone wanted to give their opinion. They're like, stud quarterback. And Mason and I said we can't choose quarterback because that's too obvious. So you want to get the best quarterback every year. But everyone's like, amazing quarterback, incredible running back, fantastic receiver. I'm like, you can't list all of the positions because, of course, you just want to recruit the very best positions. But I do feel like corner. Man, if Notre Dame can hit a home run there, um, maybe they did in this 2021 class. I got Philip Riley, Ryan Barnes, JoJo Johnson. We'll see what the future holds for those guys, but maybe it is in the 2022 class when Notre Dame gets kind of that bona fide. 5-star level cornerback. And if they do, you got to think Mike Mickens will have a huge role in that as Notre Dame's cornerbacks coach. And of course, his really childhood friend is Marcus Freeman. They went to high school together, knew each other in middle school. And Freeman, perfect transition here, Lou. Uh, I said in our Pod Like a Champion recruiting show on Tuesday night, we recorded it, Lou. I said I'm all aboard the Marcus Freeman hype train. Might be the conductor of it, and I don't really like to give someone so much hype when they're not even officially like announced by the school yet. I think it's still pending in the hiring process. Of course, Notre Dame announced it, but like I said, it's still pending. So hasn't coached it down yet for Notre Dame. But I don't know, Lou. Just from what I've been seeing on the recruiting front, and then just everything you hear about him or we heard about him in the coaching search carousel and just how big of a name Marcus Freeman was. So much hype. So I'm saying all of this to dish it to you and like give us your voice of reason here because I'm usually not a big hype guy, but I've kind of fallen into it.
Yeah. Well, one of the main things that Brian Kelly noted, one of the first things he noted about Marcus Freeman is he's one of the more dynamic recruiters in the country. And, he said it last December prior to the Camping World Bowl against Iowa State is that we can't continue to be just satisfied with top 10 to top 15 ranked classes. We've got to ratchet it up to a level where we're consistently in the top five. And Kelly himself admitted that he kind of put a lid on it as far as, yeah, this is about the best we can do. And maybe he hears the clock ticking as far as his career at Notre Dame. Not that he's in any danger of losing his job, obviously, or anything like that, but it's sort of like, man, do I have 4 or 5 more years? And he wants to get into that home stretch with guns blazing, both on the recruiting trail and on the field. They've established themselves as one of the top 5, 7, 10, however you want to say it in a certain year, programs in the country. Now it's like, okay, where are you? What do you need to do to crack that big three of Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State? Well, you got to be able to recruit at the same level they do, which is almost annually, and not so much for Clemson, but certainly Alabama and Ohio State, where they're consistently in the top five. And even when Clemson isn't, their rate of getting the 5 stars or proportional to the class they have. So, they may get only 16 or 17 in a class, but 4 or 5 are 5 stars like a Lawrence, a Trevor Lawrence, or others like that. Brian Breesy or a Miles Murphy, guys like that who just make a tremendous difference. So when you get somebody like a Marcus Freeman, you got to tap it as much as you can as far as taking advantage on it in the recruiting trail, because chances are, if Marcus Freeman is who they believe he's going to be, he's going to be a head coach like Clark Lee in about 2, maybe at the most 3 years, and probably won't even be able to see through an entire class, a
Right.
recruiting class, um, during his time here. And there's no secret about it. You generally come to Notre Dame for coordinator position to become a head coach. It's like your next stepping stone. So if you prove yourself on the recruiting trail and as a coordinator, you're going to get the head coaching job.
All right, with that, that will do it for this episode of the Irish Huddle. Again, appreciate everyone listening to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else, or our YouTube page. Again, please subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star review, all that good stuff. Go to blueandgold.com for all of your Notre Dame Fighting Irish football coverage in written form as well. Use that promo code Irish60, which will get you 2 months free of premium access. We will catch you guys in a couple of Thursdays for our next Irish Huddle. In the meantime, make sure you're locked into our blueandgold.com YouTube page. Search blueandgold.com on YouTube, and you should be able to find us. No problem. Take care.